I'd now like to welcome a speaker on side proposition of this motion, Dawn Foster. Dawn Foster is a journalist critical of the failed interventions of pretty much every government of recent years. She writes for The Guardian and other left-leaning outlets. Tonight, she's proposing this motion. Dawn, the floor is yours.
I'll begin by thanking a few people. I'll thank the Cambridge Union for having me. I'll thank all of you for coming to watch. I'll thank Tom for essentially making a great speech for the proposition, and our colleague at the back for pointing that out, and also my previous colleague who gave a brilliantly moving and very, very well researched and from the heart speech. I do think it's a very, very moderate proposition, and to look at that, all you need to do is look at the fact that this may be the only time in history that me and Malcolm Rifkind are speaking for the same side of the debate. I don't believe that Western military intervention is wrong in all respects. I think that when it comes to genocide, we have a moral duty to act. I think moving into Kosovo was right. I think moving into Syria, Leone was right. I'm a practicing Catholic, and so for the most part, I think that we should seek to be good to each other. I think that we should avoid harm to each other. But I think that sometimes we have extraordinarily hard decisions where we can either stand back and do nothing and watch genocide happen, we can watch an incredible amount of harm happen, or we can move in. My problem with the past is that this has made it much harder to do. So when I was growing up, one of the first political things I did as a 13, 14-year-old was stand for vigils against the Iraq War. I think a huge amount of the population felt that this was an unjust war. We didn't feel that the moral duties that we were told we had been met, and we felt that a lot of the evidence wasn't there for Western military intervention. We felt that the dossier was possibly dodgy. We were proven right. And I think Iraq has done so much harm to our trust in politicians that it has set us back a huge amount. I think there have been many, many wars where we shouldn't have gone in, and there have been many, many wars where the West have gone in and withdrawn too quickly. And I think that there are a couple of reasons why this is hugely problematic, and I'll go on to them now. I think first of all, we need to remember that war involves people. It involves the victims of war, but it also involves the soldiers. My grandfather fought in the Second World War, and he liberated a concentration camp, came back with his battalion, and could never, ever speak about it. He suffered from extreme PTSD. It ruined his relationship with my grandmother forever. He could barely speak to us a lot of the time. And it was only after his death that I found out, while trying to research the family history, that I discovered that the one time he had spoken about his experiences in the Second World War were to the Imperial War Museum when the Oral History Project had approached my grandfather and asked him and his battalion to speak about everything that happened during the war. Some of it was quite sweet. He talked about how he met my grandmother, which I'd never heard before. He talked about his initial excitement at going to war. And then he talked about the real experience of it, about thinking more about the politics of it, and then getting to the concentration camps and realizing that essentially he was told that afterwards that they had gone to stop a genocide, but thinking that they could have stopped it sooner if things had been done differently. They could have saved more British lives. They could have saved more Jewish lives. They could have saved more of the lives of many people. I'm disabled, I'm Catholic. A lot of both people with disabilities and Catholics were also killed in the Holocaust. So many people were. Things could have been different. We often talk about the Great War, World War I. That was a hugely bloodthirsty war with no real rhyme or reason behind it. And then you look at the victims that come afterwards. So you have soldiers who even now come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. I speak to them, a lot of them are homeless, a lot of them use food banks, a lot of them struggle with housing, and they just aren't supported by a government that has sent them to war, and they genuinely should be. And then you look abroad, and you realise that in the past, often, the West, when they have rushed into an area, have withdrawn too early or caused so much distrust by moving in that they have caused a huge amount of harm afterwards. So, for instance, the entire globe could have eradicated polio if it wasn't for certain interventions. I've spoken to multiple global health experts who say that polio only now exists in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and that is because when the Red Cross go in with vaccines, people don't trust them. There are lots and lots of rumours that these vaccines are poisonous for children because they no longer trust the West. They no longer trust particularly Americans, and as a result, a lot of children haven't been vaccinated, and we could have eradicated polio beforehand. When it comes to, for instance, water projects and infrastructure projects that the West often try to bring into areas after they've bombed them, understandably, a lot of people increasingly feel that this is a new form of colonialism. They don't trust people over and over again, and things that could be rebuilt or things that could be improved can't be because of this. And I think it's also caused a massive, massive distrust amongst all of us in politics. I think when it comes to Syria, we could have acted earlier and things may have been very, very different. But because of Iraq and because of Afghanistan, people looked at the absence of evidence when it came to Iraq. They looked at what happened afterwards in Afghanistan and Iraq and wondered whether or not Syria would not turn out identically. So, I have no easy answers. I can't decide whether, if I was a politician, I would have voted to intervene more, quicker or not. I don't have the full evidence in front of me, but I do know that almost everyone I knew was a lot more reticent and was a lot more nervous about it because of the past. And, the past has killed millions of people. When it comes to Western military intervention, that could have been avoided. But it's also caused so much distrust amongst people in Britain, people in Ireland, people in the US, when it comes to trusting their politicians on matters of intervention, but it's also made people hate us globally. Quite a few of my friends are Iraqi, and some of them are from Syria, and none of them that I speak to think ISIS would exist if it wasn't for the Iraq War. They feel that so much radicalization has been able to happen because of unnecessary Western military intervention. So I think this is a very moderate motion, and I think that when it comes to human life, we have ruined too many human lives. People die, and there is nothing that we can do to take that back. But people also suffer, soldiers and civilians, with the effects of war forever. Public health suffers, but also politically across the globe, our trust in politicians suffers to the extent that in the future, when it comes to matters of stopping a genocide, if there is another Kosovo, if there is another Sierra Leone, will we actually go in and stop it? Or will people be too nervous? No, I'm finished. Have a good one.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for that speech.